Barth live Patriots beat Thursday night of free agency week, and we have covered a lot of ground already, Alex, in a lot of different ways. But tonight we are going to start with a couple of different things that have happened recently. We're also going to answer some questions later on in the show. So we're going to do a Q&A style like we normally do on Thursdays. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we possibly can later on in the show. But Alex, we wanted to start with Kyle Van Noy returning to the Patriots on a 2-year deal. It's pretty telling that a lot of these Patriots, Van Noy, Ted Karras, coming back from Patriots South down there in Miami. I think it's pretty telling, though, that we're getting to the point now where guys like Chase Winovich, Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, Bill Belichick clearly said that's not enough. Right. We're not going to count on these young guys next year. We're going to get some veterans in here. We're going to plug some holes with immediate starters. And that's what it feels like with Van Noy, is that we're back in that, okay, they're not going to trust the young kids to step up anymore. They're going to go ahead and get a guy back in here like Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, and I think we kind of talked about this on the offensive side of the ball on Tuesday with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, but not only is Kyle Van Noy a good signing in the vacuum, he's a good player. Anytime you add good players, it's a good thing.
Right.
But, I mean, he makes the Matt Judon signing that much better because now, if teams want to pay a lot of attention to Matt Judon on one side, Kyle Van Noy is right there on the other, and Kyle Van Noy is not a guy you can ignore. Or maybe it allows them to move those guys around. Somebody floated on Twitter, maybe Kyle Van Noy plays a little bit of middle linebacker. Maybe they try Matthew Judon, who's become a good player against the run in the middle. Like they've given themselves more options now. I think too, and look, they have a lot of leadership on the team, but they lost 2 big-time locker room voices in David Andrews and Patrick Chung today. Or we think they lost Andrews, but we know they lost Chung. He retired, and we'll get to that. But Van Noy is a guy who, has a stake in that locker room. He's a guy who the other players they listen to. He's been here. He knows what it takes to win. He knows what expected. So the Kyle Van Noy, and they got him for no money. I don't remember what the exact details were, but it was – I think the total money
$13.5 million, I think it was, is a total value contract.
Right. And he was supposed to get more than $13 million just this year from Miami. So they got him, it sucks that happened to him and he lost out on a ton of money, but they got him for great value. So that was a home run signing. The only way it could have been better is if it broke during our show instead of, 35 minutes after.
I know, it happened right afterwards, and we kept on hinting at it because I had an inkling that Kyle Van Noy might be coming back.
Yeah.
And they kept on saying, maybe Kyle Van Noy, maybe Kyle Van Noy. I think what you like so much about him is not only on top of the fact that he had 4 years in the system already and then a year in Miami. So basically 5 years in the Patriots system, if you want to count Brian Flores as sort of an extension of the Patriots playbook down in Miami. But I think the thing that you like most about him is that his ability to play on the edge of the defense. Now they're going to have stout edge setters against the run on both sides. Van Noy on one side, Judon on the other side. You got 2 guys there that can really set the edge, that are athletic enough to prevent runs from getting outside of them and strong enough to hold up at the point of attack as well. Van Noy was also somebody that had a career high in 2019 and led the team in quarterback pressures with over 60 of them. So he can rush the passer a little bit. You know that he's going to thrive in your scheme. You know exactly how you're going to use the player. It's just a no-brainer to me. But I think the next shoe to drop, we can sit here and talk more about Kyle Van Noy. It makes all the sense in the world that the Patriots want to bring him back, right? I don't think that's any type of shock whatsoever. I think where the questions are for us and people like us that talk about this stuff for 2 hours every single night is, what do they do with Chase Winovich? What does this mean for Josh Uche and Anthony Jennings from last year's draft? Could Winovich, I think in particular, who's sort of in year 3, heading towards the second half of his rookie contract, could he be somebody that they try to dangle? Could they get a second-round pick back for Chase Winovich and try to fill in some picks there? That's definitely something that we've talked about, of filling in that gap from 47 to 96, acquiring picks on day 2 of the draft to maybe make a move up for a quarterback. These are some of the assets that maybe they don't need anymore moving forward. I think that it's a little bit too early to give up on the rookies from last year, but I think they know what kind of player in their scheme Chase Winovich is, and he's probably a situational pass rusher with Judon and Kyle Van Noy back in the mix.
And I think, too, just having him in the building, and Matthew Judon, this applies to him too, having them there to work with Chase Winovich, with Josh Uche, with Anthony Jennings. I mean, that's going to make those guys better. We talked last year about how some of those guys, maybe not Uche, but, especially Jennings, I feel like a lot of people are writing Anthony Jennings off. He's a good player. It's an adjustment. Yeah. And we talked about those guys maybe not getting as much of a development window as they needed. They're going to get a chance now to really hone their game and focus on their craft and get used to the next level without the pressure of having to support the entire defense. Their play time is probably going to go down, not because they're bad, just it's going to be probably where it should be. They were probably playing more than they should have last year. So, it's just another reason why this is such a valuable signing.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And the reason why I brought up Winovich as a potential trade candidate too is because I think Uche, if you're going to keep one of these guys as a sub rusher,
it's Uche, yeah.
Uche can do the same thing, right? And I think Uche can play a little bit more off the line of scrimmage too. So that's I think is something that you're going to see moving forward, is that Uche might be working out more at inside linebacker and also edge rusher as well. With Van Noy and Judon in the mix, he probably can play more if he can develop as an inside linebacker. Maybe that's a position, and they can go like they did in 2019 at times and go true 3-4, right, where they have actually real linebackers on the field.
Well, some of the signings they've made, that kind of feels like they're trending towards that outside of the linebacker position. A guy like Godshaw, the kid they added today, who I don't think is a roster lock, but he's another one of these big body linemen. It certainly feels like they're trending towards that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last point that I just want to make with Kyle Van Noy is one that you made up in your opening kind of thought on him. He was a guy that everybody gravitated towards in that locker room and had a lot of love from people in that locker room, and had a lot of young guys looking up to him as somebody that they could sort of emulate and sort of understand the playbook through. And I know there is some people at your station in particular, Alex, sorry to call them out, but that think Kyle Van Noy is a little bit too big for his bridges, right? And he talks a little bit too much, and he's a little bit too high on himself and all that kind of stuff. Talking to him, I never really took it that way.
Sounds like your dog doesn't like Kyle Van Noy either. It sounds like Atlas isn't a big Kyle Van Noy.
The little guy is, we're trying a new thing tonight. He doesn't like it when I come in here and do the show. He feels like I've left him, right? So we're leaving the door open tonight to let him come in here and say hi to Dad when he feels lonely. So or we'll see how it goes. But yeah, the barking, he's a cutie though. No one cares.
When he wasn't barking until you mentioned that Kyle Van Noy's maybe a little full of himself, and it sounds like maybe he's agreeing. So
that's true. But back to Kyle Van Noy, I think that what we're seeing with him is that he absorbs a lot of confidence, right? And whether that sometimes comes off as cocky to some people in the media or not, this is a guy that had a lot of confidence out there in 2019. He knew he was a good player that season. He knew he was having a good year. He was feeling himself a little bit. And I think that when you get into some of these players in the NFL and you're in the locker room, you understand that in order to be successful in this league, you do have to have that edge to you a little bit. You do have to have that kind of confidence to you a little bit, because when you're not confident, then you don't play well. So I think that's a big element of it as well. I just wanted to throw that out there too. All right, let's move on to Patrick Chung announcing his retirement from the NFL. So Patrick Chung, after 11 seasons in the league, 10 seasons with the Patriots, 3-time Super Bowl champion. I think my first question before we get into the impact about Patrick Chung on the field for the Patriots moving forward, is Patrick Chung a Patriots Hall of Famer, yes or no?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. When you talk about the guys the Patriots look for, when they draft a player, when they sign a player young, like what do they want that guy to be? If the guy turns into a superstar, great. What they want is a guy like Chung, a guy who's going to execute his assignment. You never have to worry about him screwing up. He maybe wasn't the best player in terms of going above and beyond, but once he got back for that second stint, right? It was rough here the first time around, especially in coverage. But when he got back for that second stint, he was never out of position. He never missed an assignment. There was never blown coverage, very few penalties. He was he didn't miss games really until the tail end there. The injuries kind of caught up to him. Just a reliable, solid player, smart football player, a leader. Mike Reese had the stat. This was the best one. He's the first player in NFL history to go to the playoffs in the first 11 years of his career. Think about that. And he was a starter on most of those teams, or if he wasn't starting, played a key role on most of those teams. That guy was, some guys from the first dynasty, when you want to talk about like the prototypical Patriot, the Mr. Patriots, I don't know that he's Brewski, but I look at a guy like Kevin Falk, right, who wasn't, perennial Pro Bowler, probably wasn't even the best player on the team at his position for most of his career. But do those Patriots teams become what they are without Kevin Falk? Absolutely not. The Patriots don't win 3 Super Bowls in Dynasty 2.0. They don't have some of those truly dominant defenses they had there in the mid-2000s. Those don't happen without Patrick Chung.
Yeah, so what I think about Patrick, I agree with you 100% that he should have a red jacket and be in the Patriots Hall of Fame someday. I think the one thing that he doesn't get enough credit for is that we hear a lot about guys like Deion Buchanan or Malcolm Jenkins kind of inventing that hybrid safety box role, right? That basically a safety at 220 pounds, 25 pounds, playing a linebacker position so that they can come down in the box and guard tight ends, because the league just, especially during Patrick Chung's career in the 2010s, just exploded at pass catching tight end, right? It used to just be, you had Tony Gonzalez, you had Jason Witten, you had Antonio Gates, there were Ben Coates back in the day. There were some great pass catching tight ends, don't get me wrong, but then all of a sudden that position became basically just a glorified wide receiver, right? And you had to put a guy on them. You could no longer guard the Travis Kelce's, the Rob Gronkowski's of the world with linebackers. They were too athletic. They were too good as receivers to guard those guys with 250-pound linebackers. So the league had to evolve. And Bill Belichick and Patrick Chung were at the very precipice of that evolution. And I feel like he never gets talked about as that one of those first hybrid type of guys. So the Patriots brought him back in 2014. Bill Belichick's talked about this a lot, that they got it wrong the first time with Patrick Chung. They were playing him as a deep safety. They recognized that he needed to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage and basically use him as a cornerback the second time around. That's what they were able to do, and they developed a really good kind of position for him, and they sort of invented a role for him that made more sense. The other thing that Bill Belichick was so high on Patrick Chung about was his tackling. And I think that's something that gets really slept on about all defenders, but especially defensive backs, is open field tackling. And he was one of those guys that was an extremely sure tackler. And Belichick actually called him one of the best tacklers he's ever coached, which is very, very high praise given how many great defensive players Bill Belichick has worked with. But with all that said, we love Patrick Chung. Great career for the Patriots. Very deserving guy to be in the Patriots Hall of Fame someday.
One more thing that we should add, because it would be wrong not to add it. The guy was incredible when it came to the fans. I mean, interacting with people on Twitter, doing events, signing autographs at training camp. I mean, the guy, you talk about guys who a guy who got it, not just on the field, but what it meant to play in the city of Boston and with the fans here and how loyal and rabid this fan base can be. And it's not for everybody. It's admittedly not for everybody, but he just got it. At Celtics games, he's always like the first one on the Jumbotron. Yeah. Again, like the interactions on Twitter, stuff like that. Carrying out the trophy at Red Sox opening day. I mean, a guy that just truly embraced what it meant to be a Boston athlete, not just a member of the New England Patriots. Those guys are very few and far between. So I think that, there's a guy, he will never have to buy a drink in the city of Boston or in the region of New England ever again. If you ever see Patrick Chung at a bar, do not let him take out his wallet. That is our duty as Patriots fans. Get the guy a drink.
Well, I might see him on Lake Winnipesaukee at some point. He's got the
that's right. Yeah.
So maybe we'll see him up there in the Bay. But I do want to mention where the Patriots are going to go from here at that position, because Bill Belichick has aggressively added players at that, what I would call a tight end stopper type of role, right? He's really been stressing that. Last year, they had a tight end gauntlet. They played pretty much every good tight end in the league last year. And you're just going to keep playing those guys over and over and over again. Now, granted, they have 2 of them on their team now, so they don't have to worry about Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith anymore, but they do have to worry about Travis Kelce. They do have to worry about a boatload of guys, Mark Andrews, whoever you want to talk about.
Well, let's keep in mind, though, that through that tight end gauntlet, it kind of fell apart at the end there with the Texans game, right? But through the beginning with, what was it? It was Waller, Kelce. This isn't in order. They had Waller, Kelce, Kittle, whatever was left of Greg Olsen, Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry. I mean, they had some really good tight ends there. And through, I think, week 10 or week 11, they were second in the league in terms of receptions and yards allowed to tight ends. So the coaching staff can do it. And as good as they were last year, I think it can actually get better because now they've upgraded the personnel at that spot.
Yeah, so the
upgraded, or I should say, in Duggar's case, guys are just learning and getting better.
Right, so Duggar is the first guy, right? He's the first guy that gets the crack at it, I think. But the Jalen Mills signing, too, makes a whole lot more sense now that Patrick Chung is going to be retiring from football. Now you can understand why they wanted to get in another defensive back that had some versatility and that could play multiple spots, that could play on the back end or in the box as a safety. And he has that converted cornerback type of skill that you might be able to have him guard tight ends. If Duggar's having a bad game against somebody, then you throw Jalen Mills at him. They also have Adrian Phillips, of course, but I think Adrian Phillips played a little bit of a different role than Patrick Chung. Adrian Phillips played like a linebacker. He was literally a linebacker last year. He was in linebacker meeting rooms. He was playing linebacker with a DB number. And that was really his size and his number were the only things that made him a defensive back last year. So I think it's a little bit of a different role than maybe what they were using Patrick Chung as. So the other guy I think we could mention is Juwan Williams. Maybe he competes a little bit for some of those snaps as well. We did see him at times last year play that role. Week 1, Mike Gesicki, he shut down Mike Gesicki pretty good. He never played again because they wanted to get Duggar, in the mix a little bit. But Juwan Williams has had opportunities there as well. So between Mills, Duggar, Juwan Williams, Adrian Phillips, as much as we love Patrick Chung and think that he was a great Patriot, they're pretty good at that spot, I would say, moving forward.
Yeah, and I think what really excites me is you look at the first 2 guys they signed, and we'll see what they do with Juwan Williams, because I think maybe he still factors in as a corner, depending on what happens with J.C. Jackson. We'll see. Now Jeff Howe's saying they're not going to trade Gilmore, so I'm going to keep it to just Duggar and Mills here. What I'm excited about is both of those guys are good box safeties, but both are guys who can play deep as well. And I've talked plenty, right, about how they never really replaced Ron Harmon, and they need that second deep safety next to McCourty when they go to those 3 safety sets. And I think that they can really get creative here. If you have 3 safeties on the field, we're going to count Phillips as a linebacker at this point, or he's not on the field. But if you have 3 safeties on the field and Devin McCourty, right, Mills and Duggar, you can kind of line Mills and Duggar up in no man's land, and you got to figure out as the offense who's coming into the box and who's dropping as the deep safety, because they can each do both. And they're both really smart players too. They're not just good, they're smart. And you need that when you're doing when you're asked to do a variety of roles. And I think just kind of those 2 guys going back and forth will get really, really interesting in how they deploy those 2 guys between the box and the back end.
Yeah, this is all of a sudden they have so much depth in the front 7 that you just don't really know how they're going to mix and match everybody, right? I mean, last year was such a barren position, especially linebacker. Now all of a sudden you have all these guys that they can throw at this problem. So that's a good thing for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And I think moving forward, we also need to talk about the kicker position, Alex. Nick Folk coming back. This one you can take it away on. It's kind of like the offensive lineman, right? We'll let you kind of answer this one, but I think this was a no-brainer for everybody. Nick Folk kicked extremely well last year, obviously, for the Patriots, and there was no reason to move on anytime soon.
Yeah, he was one of the best kickers in the league, career high 92.9% on field goals, didn't miss a field goal after week 2, hit 26 straight to close the season, and they get him for very little money. He right now is on track to be the 14th highest paid kicker in football. I think that it's important that they got him back, but I think it's important they got him back at the right price, because as much as I love Nick Folk and as good as he was last year, it's such a finicky position. It can come one year and be gone the next. So, I mean, with that contract, what that tells me is he's the presumptive starter, but Justin Rohrwasser and Roberto Aguayo are going to have a chance in camp to maybe get that job. But it would have been really scary to me going in with just those 2 guys and even maybe a rookie not having an experienced option. People, because I floated on Twitter before they brought Folk back, because I really wasn't sure if they were going to, that maybe they draft a kicker, and they met with Evan McPherson, who's the most accurate kicker in SEC history. He'll be in the draft this year. Somebody said they have Aguayo, they have Rohrwasser. Why would they do that? Those are objectively 2 of the biggest kicker draft busts in the last 10 years. Right. Those guys are projects at this point. So whether Folk can recapture what he had last year, and there's no reason to think he can't, but if he gets the yips, whatever, just having, yes, I'll shut up in a minute. Thank you. Just having an experienced veteran, a guy who knows what he's doing, a guy who you believe you can rely on, I think is very important as they go into training camp here. So it's just Matthew Slater now. They got Bethel re-signed. They got Cody Davis re-signed. Jake Bailey's obviously under contract. We're waiting on Matthew Slater, whether or not he's going to retire.
Yeah, that I hope Matthew Slater doesn't retire. I guess we're still waiting on that one. That's true. I think with Folk though, he was one of the more consistent players on the team last year, and I know that that's like not a good thing necessarily when your kicker is the most consistent player on your team. But
ask the Chicago Bears if they'd like a more consistent kicker.
That's true. He made some really clutch kicks, and that was really impressive to me. Was not just the accuracy and the consistency, but the cojones to make some of those kicks late in games. I know that the Patriots weren't necessarily playing in the playoffs or in the Super Bowl, and the stakes might not have been extremely high to make some of those kicks, but still, those are game winners, walk off the field type of kicks, and he was able to make them. But I think the point that you made about how inconsistent kickers can be year to year, they're kind of like relievers in baseball, right? Like one year they're shut down, the next year they're looking for a new job. I think that we can see Nick Folk being able to hold down that position for one more year. I'm not too worried that he's going to fluctuate all that much. Am I crazy to think Roberto Aguayo might be the long-term best play long-term over Justin Rohrwasser? Because I kind of feel like if either one of those guys is going to figure it out, I kind of feel like it might be Roberto Aguayo.
So the breakdown there, first of all, Aguayo, when Nick Folk took his job the first time in Tampa.
Right.
So that's going to be a mental element to it that he's back with Folk. But I mean, I remember being told when he went for workouts after he first got cut by Tampa, he was missing, and I don't mean missing kicks. I mean, missing the ball.
Yeah.
Swinging and missing. He was his last job before Patriots practice squad kicker was PGA Tour intern. This is a guy who's come, you're talking, he's the Daniel Bard of the National Football League right now, a guy who went all the way to the bottom. And part of the issue was he spent his whole career kicking in sunny Florida. And I don't know that New England is the place where he rehabs his image. That being said, the biggest plus for Rohrwasser coming out was he had kicked in Buffalo, where he's from, and then Rhode Island, and then West Virginia, and he's used to the bad weather. That's his biggest plus. So Aguayo has more natural ability. I don't know if New England's the place to tap into it. He could have a really strong summer and then fall apart by November. So we'll see if he's the long-term. So are you saying he's a better long-term option than Rohrwasser, or you think he's the long-term plan?
I think he's I think there are better odds that Roberto Aguayo figures it out than Justin Rohrwasser.
Okay. I will agree with that. I think for Bill, it's more of a pet project. I think that the guy after Folk realistically isn't on the roster right now. I don't think they draft a kicker this year, or I wouldn't expect them to. They still might, but I wouldn't expect them to look at Aguayo and say we have the next guy in the building.
Yeah, that's fair. I just think that I watched Justin Rohrwasser kick in training camp last year, and for those people that have not been to Patriots training camp, they have porter potties that are in between both fields. And the goalposts on the field that they have goalposts on are on where they should be, and the porter potties are like the tunnel coming out of the left end zone from Gillette Stadium, right? The opposite of the lighthouse. And he was hitting the porter potties. Well, he was, and then the problem.
But he was making contact with the ball.
He was making contact, but the problem is that one kick was hitting the porter potties over here, and the other pick was in the parking lot over there, right? So
he averaged a made kick then.
there was no middle ground. And then when he did have a leg, though, I'll give him that. All right, he does have a big leg. All right, let's answer some of these questions. If you have questions, now's the time. Fire them off. There's a lot of comments.
Well, can we get those are coming in. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and I'm actually very interested to get your thoughts on this. So they go out today, right, and they sign their second signing of the day. I think it was ultimately their second signing of the day. The kid from Green Bay. I'm scrolling because I don't have the name off the top of my head yet. Montravius Adams, right, from Green Bay. Guy who was
another Drew Rosenhaus client, by the way.
Another Drew Rosenhaus client. And why this one stands out to me, he's a good college player, all SEC in 2016. Couldn't really, third round pick, couldn't really grasp it with the Packers. Played about 20% of the defensive snaps over his career, played a special teams role as well. But the reason it stands out is he was the 13th ranked player in his high school recruiting class. He was ranked at his position ahead of Joey Bosa, ahead of Ashawn Robinson, ahead of Maurice Hurst.
And that tells you what you know about these high school recruiting.
And overall, he was ranked one spot ahead of Jalen Ramsey. So, right. Yes, recruiting rankings when it comes to high school are an absolute roller coaster.
Yeah.
Absolute total. It's a mess. The top quarterback ranked in that class, Jared Goff, was down the 200s. The top quarterback was Christian Hackenberg. That being said, these rankings don't come from nowhere. And the Patriots have a history of signing guys who they weren't necessarily bad in college, right? Like I said, Adams was all SEC. Some of the guys I just named were unanimous consensus All-Americans. But guys like J.C. Jackson, guys like Byron Cowart were elite high school prospects. Byron Cowart was the number one prospect in the nation in his recruiting class.
Yeah.
And they go to college and they don't quite live up to the hype. And the Patriots have had some success turning these guys around. So when I see a guy like Adams, and again, very good college career, but didn't quite live up to that 13th overall national ranking, right. I wonder, is there some potential there that Bill Belichick sees that he can tap into? And it's almost like, I wonder if he goes back and looks at the high school tape or looks at the college tape, like the early college tape, and sees, did Auburn move him somewhere? Did they do something to hamper his development? Is there something that they missed that he thinks he can go back and get?
Right. Byron Cowart's a big one of those, a guy that was number one high school recruit in the country and is a player that has a lot of talent, a lot of skill. Maybe you can tap that into that. I agree that those types of players are definitely on the Patriots' radar. So another one of those guys, like I mentioned, another Drew Rosenhaus client as well. So I think that's 5 Drew Rosenhaus guys in the last this offseason. Also remember Antonio Brown was a Drew Rosenhaus client. Rob Gronkowski is a Drew Rosenhaus client. J.C. Jackson is a Drew Rosenhaus client. So the Patriots have done a lot of business with Mr. Rosenhaus over the last couple of years, and they seem to have a good rapport with him, which means all of his big clients, other than Gronk, obviously, who's probably never coming back here, isn't ever coming back here. Yeah. They have a good relationship with the agent, which is not a bad agent to have a good relationship with, because seeing that he's one of the biggest in the business. All right, let's talk about some of these questions. I think this is
you want to do Mariota?
I want to do this one first. And we're going to get to Mariota. Don't you worry.
And we have to, because I saw it in the chat, Tim Boyle signed by the Lions. I'm not giving up hope, but.
Okay. So Jeff Howe, the Athletic, reported today that the Patriots are not actively shopping Stephon Gilmore at the moment. If they get blown away by an offer, maybe they would entertain it at that point, but it's not something that they're actively seeking a trade on. What gives here? Because the writing is on the wall that Stephon Gilmore is not getting a contract extension from Bill Belichick. So what are we missing, right? And I think the one thing that we might be not missing, but I think the one answer might be Bill Belichick wants to win now, right? And trading Stephon Gilmore, no matter what way you slice it, makes the team worse in 2021, right? They're not going to get better unless it's for Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or something like that. They're not going to get better by trading Stephon Gilmore. So maybe it's as simple as Bill really wants to compete next year, trading his best corner, maybe his best defensive player still, even after all these signings on the defensive side of the ball, is not the way to compete. I feel like that might be the just as simple as that they just feel like their team is better with Stephon Gilmore on it.
Yeah, and I wonder, so kind of what I thought is, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, they tendered J.C. Jackson at the second round level, not the first round level. That to me tells me they're open to the idea of potentially losing J.C. Jackson.
Right.
And I wonder if it's, we're going to have to give one of these guys a contract. Maybe they'd rather pay Stephon Gilmore a little bit more, but you pick up that extra second round pick instead of trading Stephon Gilmore, and maybe get a second round pick back there too, but you don't know, in keeping J.C. Jackson and paying J.C. Jackson, who's the lesser player. So maybe this is maybe the writing's not on the wall that Gilmore's not getting a contract. Maybe this is telling us that right, because we've talked about it. What's Gilmore's value? Probably a second round pick. Would you rather have not trade, have Stephon Gilmore in a second round pick where he's being paid slightly more, or J.C. Jackson in a second round pick where he's being paid slightly less? Maybe they're leaning towards option A, and that's what this is. Or maybe it's a bait and switch. Maybe it's, hey, we're not trading him, because the offers, we're not trading him because the offers suck and it ups the offer. So who knows?
Well, I don't know exactly what the offers that have been out there that have been floated. But I do know that his market for Stephon Gilmore's market I'm talking about hasn't been super robust to date, right? There's no team out there offering a top 50 pick or a first round pick right now, to my knowledge, for Stephon Gilmore. A big reason why is that knee injury that he suffered last year. At his age, at his position, to be dealing with knee issues at this point of his career, that's a scary proposition for a team that's going to want to sign him to an extension. The Patriots are the only team that knows how bad the knee actually is, right? And if it's going to be something that's going to have to be managed going forward. So there isn't a whole lot of teams that are offering a high draft pick right now. There's no teams that are offering a first rounder, I can tell you that. And there's definitely no teams that are offering a whole lot for Stephon Gilmore at the moment. I think it's much more realistic to maybe get a player-for-player trade involving Stephon Gilmore at this point than a pick. Maybe because I think the pick that's coming back would be a pick that the Patriots would say the player is worth more than that pick. We're talking about a third, fourth round or something like that.
Well, this is where I was looking for the Zach Ertz trade. I guess now that's probably off the table, but
yeah. Definitely off the table. All right, let's talk about David Andrews for a second. Still a free agent. The Miami Dolphins moved on Matt Skura. That seemed to be David Andrews' top destination. There seemed to be out of the David Andrews market. There are a couple of other teams I think could make sense. Baltimore, certainly, where Skura just came from, could make a little bit of sense. I think there is some inkling there that maybe some of the teams in the NFC, like Green Bay or something like that, might get it on David Andrews too. I don't know where he necessarily ends up, but the Patriots told the belief is that Ted Karras is going to be the starting center for the Patriots in 2021. Yeah. I think the door is pretty much shut on David Andrews coming back, and Ted Karras did not sign here in New England thinking that he was going to be a backup again, right? He signed here thinking that he was going to be a starter. So I think there is maybe a slightly ajar door if David Andrews has to come back to the Patriots and say, hey, I really don't like what's out there. Like, let's just get this done. Then maybe they could still figure this out. But I still feel like the Patriots have sort of moved on from that.
So it's all true until it isn't, right? David Andrews isn't coming back, and Ted Karras signed to be the starting center. That's all true until it suddenly isn't, and David Andrews has nowhere else to go, and things can change. And remember, Ted Karras can play guard too, so that's a possibility. Sure. I think so. First off, I like Atlanta for him. He gets to go and play back home in Georgia. They desperately need somebody who knows how to win football games, who knows how to close out football games.
Left, they're starting
right. So that's why I'm assuming they have the opening. I'm not closing the book on him going to Miami. I haven't seen the dollars in Matt Skura's contract, but they were reportedly low. It's a 1-year deal, and he wasn't good last year. He got benched. If you remember the game against New England, I know it was in the rain, but he was brutal. He, more than anybody else, cost them that game. I don't know that he's there to be the starter. Maybe it's been reported and I missed it. That's certainly possible. But if David Andrews is out there, and I think when they signed Skura, Rodney Hudson was still available as well. I'm not signing Matt Skura to be my signing center over those guys. I don't care about the money. He's not that good of a player.
True.
So I'm not ruling Miami out. That might have been, hey, if we don't get Andrews, we have this guy as a fallback. But if we don't, we have a really good backup. So because they have some cap too, dude. If you don't stop posting about JJ Watt in the chat, we're gonna boot you.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
I don't know if you can kick him or whatever.
Oh, I do have the power to block people. I can throw that out there right now.
I think you can throw that out there. JJ Watt's kind of washed. There you go. Boot him.
Yeah. I do have the power. All right. I want to talk briefly about the Patriots West passing camp that's going to be going on next week. So Jared Stidham is organizing a passing camp. Cam Newton is going to be there. Hunter Henry is going to be there. N'Keal Harry is going to be there. A bunch of Patriots are going to be there.
Assuming he doesn't get traded first.
True. Fair enough. But a bunch of Patriots are going to be there. And I think it is a little bit interesting that Stidham's the one that organized it. I think that is something there, right, in terms of what's going on. Doesn't feel like, although we've all given up on Jared Stidham, probably, that Jared Stidham's given up on Jared Stidham, which obviously makes some sense. But this is good news all around, though. These passing camps really are more about building chemistry, building bonds off the field than anything. I don't know how much actual football they're really going to get done, but you're able to get those guys at least running some routes that they're going to run in the season, running some things that they're going to run in terms of, getting on the same page with the quarterbacks and things like that. Certainly doesn't hurt that those guys are getting together out there in California.
Well, so to the point of Stidham organizing it, to use this comparison, when me, you, and Mike Petraglia were working together at CLNS, right? When I was like really, really early in on it, I would sometimes organize, hey guys, let's do a video. Hey guys, let's, I think the first year when we weren't traveling and we were, covering games from the parking lot at Gillette, that Detroit Lions game, right? I was the one who kind of put that together. Were people tuning in to see me? No, they were tuning in to see you and Trags. It was very clearly nobody knew who I was at the time. Not that anybody knows now, but really nobody knew who I was at the time. But it was just easier for me to do that and me to be that guy. I wonder if it's just easier for Stidham at this point to be that guy and get everybody together, and it kind of makes sense, and Cam's willing to let him do it, and you move on from there. Not that I see myself as a Jarrett Stidham type. It just kind of made sense in my head.
I think that this also just speaks to how confident Cam Newton is in his own skin, right? Yes. He doesn't care that the backup.
And by the way, thank you for not taking a shot at me after that story.
Of course not. Forward. No, you took enough shots at yourself that I didn't pile on. Cam doesn't care, right? He doesn't care if Jarrett Stidham is the one organizing the camp. He's going to show up. He's going to be there. My understanding is that Cam is also going to try to organize something down in the Atlanta area over the summer, which is where Cam is from and where he trains most of the time, with some of the pass catchers as well. So this is throwing camp number one, I would say, for the Patriots this offseason. I think there will be another one, too, maybe closer to training camp in sometime in July. So I'd be on the lookout for that as well. But just I love these types of things. I eat it up. I'm not going to lie. Well, I think it's great that they want to get together and throw the ball around, even if it's nothing formal, just to be together, build that chemistry, build that camaraderie. It's important.
And just because somebody asked, Trags is back in Cincinnati now working there. My biggest question about this camp, or one of my big questions about this camp, I'm curious to see if Julian Edelman is going to be there.
Yeah.
And because how's his knee? This is where he normally works out. He's from California. He normally works out there in the summer. I wonder if he's going to be there and what part he'll take. Because I think, the report was the Patriots still aren't totally sure what his condition is. And maybe this is a good way for them unofficially to kind of check up on it and see where he's at. And he'll be out there working with guys who are fully healthy.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to.
You want to do a quick Philip Lindsay here?
No, we're going to do these.
Okay.
We're going to do the quarterback.
We got to do Mariota. That's your guy.
Okay, so here's my 2 cents on this, my evolving take on Gardner Minshew and Marcus Mariota, who seems to be the two guys that we talk about the most.
I can't imagine you have the same take for both players. I hope not.
I don't think. Well, I have my personal opinion is different than what I'm about to say. Right.
Okay.
This is what I'm hearing. I don't think the Patriots are going to be interested in either guy, to be quite frank. I think the Patriots are okay with Cam Newton as their starter in 2021 and are really more looking towards future assets, right? What the draft and what they can acquire via the draft, and maybe even getting in on a big splash quarterback trade like a Deshaun Watson, or maybe a lower one like a Jimmy Garoppolo. If Jimmy still becomes available, I don't think that door is closed of him coming back to New England. I don't think Gardner Minshew and Marcus Mariota, the two guys that they feel are the answers of any sort of long-term future here in New England. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to be in either one of those guys' markets. Now, Marcus Mariota, I do know his contract was a big problem for the Patriots. So maybe now that he's going to get released and they can sign him to a discounted deal, it could change things, certainly. But I don't think that they see either one of those guys as a long-term plan. So they're kind of more in the boat of let's continue down this bridge with Cam Newton and let's get to the other side with somebody that we feel a lot better about as a future starter.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with any of that. I think I don't think Minshew's in play. I think that Mariota's only in play, like you said, if he gets released. If that's the case, he's a better bridge than Cam. I think he's an upgrade over Cam slightly, but I think he's a little bit of an upgrade over Cam. And you at least get a position battle there at quarterback. So if they want to go with 3 guys, if they want to go with, Cam and Mariota and a rookie, that's a possibility. But because Benjamin Albright said, I think it was Benjamin Albright said today that they did at least call on Marcus Mariota at some point. But I'm not holding my breath on either of those guys. I think it's Jimmy. I think we're waiting to see what happens with Jimmy if he shakes free. And then if you want to get nuts, I don't think, and we're not going to get into the situation, but I just don't think Deshaun Watson is on any team's radar right now. The NFL start opening an investigation officially. So I think that whole thing, Patriots or any other team that's supposedly on him, I think that's all going to kind of go on pause for a little bit here.
Yeah, and that is a crazy situation. I just feel like with the Patriots and Marcus Mariota, they kind of feel like he's in between, right? He's not the future starter for the next 5 to 10 years. He's not a bridge because he's probably going to make a little bit too much money to be a bridge, right? So it's
even in free agency, you think? Even if it's free agency?
Well, I think now, I guess in free agency, a lot of things change, right?
Because so again, like I think he's in play only through free agency if the dollar amount is right.
Sure. All right, let's. I wanted to talk about Philip Lindsay.
Yeah,
their comments are coming in fast, so I'm just trying to.
We got smart viewers. They know this is a guy that I think makes some sense, and they still need. It's been all week. They got the kicker taken care of before the pass catching running back, but they still need that guy. It could be James White, but they still need that guy.
So the question is who do we like as that guy? Is there anybody that we feel really strongly about? I hadn't really necessarily thought about Philip Lindsay as an option until now because Philip Lindsay wasn't. I didn't think that the Broncos and Philip Lindsay were going to part ways the way that they have. But with that being said, I think that they should be interested in a guy like Philip Lindsay. And I would definitely entertain bringing him in here because he is, to me, a change of pace back. He's somebody that can catch the ball a little bit. He can get out in the open field and be explosive and be elusive with the ball in his hands. I think he is a fit. I think he is somebody that they should kick the tires on. I would much rather, we talked about this yesterday, I would much rather than bring in a guy like Philip Lindsay that is that change of pace from Sony Michel and Damian Harris than bring in Chris Carson or Leonard Fournette or somebody like that that's more of a retread and more of the same thing. So if they're going to have to bring in another running back, because it seems like Bill Belichick is insistent on signing another running back at some point.
It's not Belichick insistent. They need to do it. It's team construction.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
Who are they throwing the ball to out of the backfield right now?
They're insistent on doing it. I'm sticking to that.
Because it's the right thing to do. Who are they throwing the ball out of the backfield to right now?
Jonnu Smith. Put him back there. Throw him the football.
But if that's his only role, you grossly overpaid for him, and you're not using him to maximize his potential.
Not only role. I'm just saying that he can do that as a role in his entire repertoire. I just feel like, again, I've said it multiple times, just don't spend big money on that spot. If you want to pay Philip Lindsay $4 million to come here to see if he can be that scat back and that pass catching back, I'm all for it. If you want to bring James White back on a reasonable contract, I'm all for it. If you want to bring back Rex Burkhead and you feel like he's healthy enough to play, I'm all for it. But if you're going to pay a running back any sort of considerable money, the cap space will dry up eventually for the Patriots.
Well, right? I don't know if you saw that new TV deal. I don't know what it's going to. But
I'm saying this year, it's not
this year. So let me. When you say Bill is insisting, you make it sound like a chore.
It's a chore to me. It's a chore to me.
Even if it's one of those guys you just said, but it needs to get done. They need to do it because they need that guy on the roster. Do you want to do? Because somebody brought up a very interesting name.
Okay.
In Le'Veon Bell, and I'm not.
I'm just kidding. They actually did kick the tires on Le'Veon Bell last year.
Right. They called on him last year when he got traded or he got cut, right? He got cut last year.
They sure did. They were very interested. For whatever reason, the Patriots have been interested in every single running back that's hit the open market. They were interested in Leonard Fournette last year before he signed with Tampa Bay. I would actually say the Patriots finished second to Tampa Bay for Leonard Fournette. He almost signed here in New England.
Yep.
And they ended up getting beat out by Tampa Bay at the last second. So it's not my preference for them to go out and spend on running backs, but they have been wanting a running back for a while now.
So just to bring it back to Bell, because he can be that pass catching back, and he probably at his age needs a more limited role. I don't know that you have to spend a ton of money to bring in Le'Veon Bell. Did he do anything in Kansas City last year?
Not much.
So what really is his value? Is his value that much more than a guy like Philip Lindsay, where the upside is incredibly high?
I think that Philip Lindsay is younger, so I like that element of it, right? And I like the element of Philip Lindsay a little bit more about what he could do in a committee, right? I don't know. Le'Veon Bell is, I think, the type of guy to be truly successful because he is not necessarily a 20-plus yard gainer type of back, right?
But I'm saying if you just threw him in like a Rex Burkhead kind of role.
Sure. I think that he would play really well in that role. But I feel like Philip Lindsay's ceiling is definitely a little bit higher in that position.
Okay. I don't entirely disagree with that. I'm thinking more if they're going to sign this guy, it's going to be a 1-year bridge, and then they're going to draft somebody to eventually, whether it's Demetric Felton or one of these guys we've talked about, to kind of play in that role longer term.
True. That's fair. I would love for them to draft somebody for that role, but we all know that guy's going to sit for like 5 years.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. So who's the guy this year? Well, that guy sits.
Maybe it's JJ Taylor.
Maybe you go back to the pass blocking. We've had this conversation every night. So
that's true. All right. So here's another good question. It's signing, not singing. We get what he meant.
Is it though?
He meant. But I think the point is the Patriots wide receiving core. I broke down Kendrick Bourne's tape in a film review today. I've broken down Nelson Aguilar's film a couple of days ago as well. Both of those guys, Bourne feels like an F or a slot receiver to me. Nelson Aguilar is more of a Z, off-the-line flanker type of receiver. They don't have a true X. We talked about this last night. Maybe Hunter Henry is that true X. We had that conversation as well. But could the Patriots still be in the wide receiver market? I had heard that they were kicking the tires still on some of these wide receivers because the market has just been so barren. We just saw Will Fuller signed a 1-year deal today, right? Just to be somewhere next year at this point. So there's not a whole lot of guys that are blowing over the market right now. Kenny Golladay is doing some like NBA free agency nonsense where he's taking a tour around the league before he makes his decision. That kind of speaks to there's not a great fit for him contract wise and team wise because he didn't really want to go to a New England disciple, and the Giants have the best offer on the table. So he actually said that I need to come and talk to Joe Judge in person and get that done before I sign there. So the market's a little bit dry. Juju Smith-Schuster is another guy that's still a free agent. He's not a true X to me, but he's also a big name that's still out there. Well, what do you see? Do you think they're done at that position? And we can throw the draft in there as well. Are they completely done at that position? And do you feel good about their group if they are?
I mean, I'd like to see them add somebody else just for depth. I don't know, because like you mentioned, you have Aguilar, you have Bourne, you have Myers, and I feel like I'm missing somebody. Am I not? Outside of N'Keal, am I missing somebody, or is that? I mean, that's your NFL. Yeah, so that's your. I mean, maybe they bring Damiere Byrd back, but right. That's your NFL wide receiver caliber wide receivers. If they don't trade N'Keal Harry, I mean, he's a fine fourth, but I think it's better asset management. You trade him, you get something for him, and you can bring somebody in on short money to fill that role. We talked last night about potentially going out and getting a veteran X as kind of a voice in the locker room, a teacher. AJ Green would have been perfect. He's obviously off the board. I think Deshaun Jackson would be a very interesting name, although it's been reported that they're not interested in him. Brashad Perryman, unfortunately, went off the board today. That's my guy. He's going to Detroit. Yep. So there's got to be somebody out there. Maybe it's a player-for-player trade with N'Keal. We've talked about other guys that could potentially be traded. Isaiah Wynn, Sony Michel. Maybe it's something there. So we'll see what they do with that. I think if they go in the draft, I don't think it's a big body X receiver in the draft. I think they've swung and missed on those guys enough. I think you're looking at, because they didn't sign Curtis Samuel. We talked about last night why they didn't, and there are some good reasons for them passing on Curtis Samuel. But I do think they want a guy like that in the system, a guy like that who they can work with and grow. And maybe when Jonnu's deal is up, if they move on from him, who can break out. So whether that's Kadarius Toney, whether that's Jalen Darden, whoever, I do think they go receiver in the draft, but it's more of that wild card wide receiver. So
you didn't even mention Amari Rodgers. Come on, that
right, Amari Rodgers could be that guy too. You're right. Golden Tate. If we're talking about like the veteran, we know they've been interested in Golden Tate before. Yep. Was it 2 years ago they got outbid for him? So maybe he's an option. Maybe that's the guy. But I would like to see them sign somebody, but I don't know. Look, if they get Kenny Golladay on a 1-year prove-it deal, fantastic. That's awesome. But
not going to happen.
And like we talked about last night, you're going to be in 12 personnel, I think probably over 50% of the time. There's only so many snaps for all of these wide receivers to play. How much are you going to pay a guy that's only going to play 30, 35% of the time, 40 max? They can just go and get a cheap veteran to kind of steady the ship and be depth. I don't think they need to splash at wide receiver now. Edelman was the guy I missed, and I guess he's still a question mark. We don't know. But Edelman could potentially be that guy.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these. I don't know if I pulled up the right question there. Let's talk about some of these rookie quarterbacks. Here we go.
Yeah, that's not the question.
There we go. I think the question is here with the rookie quarterbacks is clearly who's going to be in range for the Patriots. I'm already on the record, and I think you agree. At this point, point, they've added so many pieces in free agency. They've added so many veterans and plugged so many holes on both sides of the football that it makes all the sense in the world to use your draft capital to get the quarterback now, right? That's the formula that a lot of teams have used in the past and been really successful with. So I think the question is Trey Lance or even a guy like a Justin Fields. I think Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are going 1 and 2 in this draft. I still believe the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson. I don't care what they say about Sam Darnold. No offense to everybody that's reported that they still like Sam Darnold. I just feel like that's smoke and mirrors at this point of the offseason to try to drum up some trade interest in Sam Darnold. But what rookie quarterback do you feel like could possibly be an option for the Patriots realistically? I think it would be great for them to be able to get their hands on Trey Lance. I've already banged the table for him last night. I can do the whole spiel again, but is he realistically going to fall far enough down in the top 10 for them to actually trade up and get him is the question.
Yes, because 6 should be in play and no price should be too high to get him if they believe in him. Not only should they trade package picks and trade up to get a shot at Trey Lance, in some ways it would be irresponsible for them not to, or it would be wasteful for them not to. What they've done with all these signings, they've closed a lot of holes on the roster, not just for this year, but for the next 2 to 3 seasons. You're not going to have as many needs, and you're only going to have so many roster spots. They have 9 draft picks right now. Do they have room on this? And granted, they got a couple 7th rounders. Those guys probably aren't making the team. But realistically, let's say they have 6 premium picks. Do they have room on this roster for 6 rookies to make the team?
Right.
Especially if one of them isn't a quarterback.
The people that are talking about still trading down in the
right.
first round.
The only pick they're trading down with is 96. That's the only pick they're trading down with. You can bet money on it because it's the Brady pick, and Bill won't let that be 1-for-1.
Right.
That's the only. But they need to consolidate these picks. They don't have enough room for all the rookies, and that's probably going to be the same case next year. They're not going to have a lot of comp picks because of how much they've spent. They probably won't have any. Right, but they need to consolidate some of these picks. And in a year where you need a quarterback, and when Trey Lance is the guy, and look, if they don't believe in Trey Lance, throw this all out. Don't draft a quarterback you don't truly believe in. But if they believe in Trey Lance, which they have reasons to, it makes no sense for them to sit at 15. It just makes no sense for them to do that. He should be, if he's not on the board at 6, either Fields or Wilson is. Do we not disagree with that?
Yeah.
So if you get to 6, even if you don't get Lance, you're getting a guy that you're going to be able to build around. So they absolutely should trade up. As for the other guys, if you've been watching for 10, 15 minutes now, you heard me do that spiel about they like the guys who were highly touted out of high school that maybe didn't hit that level in college. That's Davis Mills, I believe, was the number 1 quarterback recruit in his class and then kind of just flatlined at Stanford a little bit. He could be a guy that fits. Kellen Mond has some traits. I still don't hate Mac Jones as a player. I just think the offense they have now is so perfectly built for a guy like Trey Lance. It's going to just come back to Trey Lance. There's other guys I like, sure, but is there any reason for them not to trade up? And I saw somebody tweet today, well, they don't have the ammo to get to 6. They do. They have the ammo to get to 6. It's just a matter of them wanting it more than any other team. And they should. There's no, they don't, again, what are you going to want in the first round next year? More likely than not, it's going to be a quarterback. Maybe it's a tackle, maybe. But I feel like if you go, and who knows, because a year's a long time in the NFL. If you go, Evan, a year from today, just as a guess, what's the Patriots' biggest draft need if their roster currently stands as it is right now?
The quarterback.
So why wouldn't you use that pick to get the quarterback? You're taking the guy you take next year. You're just doing it a year early.
Right. And I also feel like we've talked a lot about how Mac Jones fits their system perfectly and does all the little things in the pocket and with his eyes and with his processing speed, all the Patriot boxes, right? He checks all of them. But I feel like the offense that they are building is just dying for a mobile quarterback. I feel like when you have 2 tight ends out there, you want to be able to run the football extremely well. Having a quarterback that in playing 10 on 11 constantly in the run game because the quarterback isn't a factor takes a little bit away from the fact that you have these 2 tight ends that can both run block, you have a physical heavy offensive line. It doesn't fit as well anymore, I don't think, on paper with Mac Jones. I think the guy that constantly I keep saying is Trey Lance. I know that you'd hate it, but Kellen Mond in the middle rounds, I think, is the guy if you're going to talk about a day 2 option because of the mobility.
But why are we? What I'm telling you is, at that point, they failed. If they're taking a quarterback on day 2, they failed at that point.
So I'm still going Trey Lance. I don't need to do the whole spiel again because I think everybody can go find it and hear it already. But I'm concerned that is going to be something that the Patriots are going to do. Is they're going to feel like they can get Kellen Mond on day 2 in the 3rd round or in the late 2nd round or something like that and turn him into Jimmy G. Right? And make him a serviceable NFL quarterback.
But that's every other offseason they've had under Belichick. And I can say this with confidence now. I'm not saying this. I can finally say it as a fact, not as a question, Evan. They are being uncharacteristically aggressive. It's not uncharacteristically aggressive to draft Kellen Mond for value on day 2. It's uncharacteristically aggressive to trade a 1st, a 2nd, and next year's 1st, and maybe another pick or 2, and move up to 6 and get Trey Lance. That fits the pattern that they've been building all offseason, and I'm going to stick with the pattern. So,
if they're going to do it, then Trey Lance is the guy to me. Mobility, arm talent, very young player still that had a lot of really good things about him in his tape in 2019. Fantastic ability to throw the football down the field from all platforms, from all angles. Top of all of that, the platform, the footwork, the timing, the rhythm, the understanding of the scheme and what he's actually asking him to do. All of those things he did extremely well at North Dakota State at only 19 years old. This guy at 24, 25 years old, even this guy with 1 year behind Cam Newton, who is a great mentor for somebody like a Trey Lance, he's going to be a really good quarterback for a long time in this league at some point.
And that, by the way, is part of why, like, I was a huge, you remember some of the arguments we had. I was a huge Mac Jones guy. And part of the reason I've moved on from that, and I still really like Mac Jones as a player, but when it comes to the Patriots, right, I liked Mac Jones before they made all these moves because he was the high floor guy. The ceiling wasn't high, but the floor was high, and it just felt like they need some stability. What better position to get stability at than quarterback? Go get the guy who's not going to be a superstar, but is a sure thing. Well, now they have stability. They added it at every position but quarterback. So that's why I'm changing. And now it's like, well, okay, they're going to be decent now. They got the stability. Now you go upside. The Trey Lance pick is all upside. That's what that pick is. So that's where
and that's why
he kind of jumps over Mac Jones for me.
Right. And I think that's why they have such a great setup for it, because they have Cam already under contract. Right. So if they have to sit Trey Lance down for a year, the same way that they did with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, for example, they have that luxury to do that with Cam here, and they still don't have to. They can build the same offense that they're going to eventually turn over to Trey Lance with Cam Newton as the starting quarterback, because Trey Lance can operate in the Patriots style offense in a timing and rhythm based scheme, or in a quick game passing scheme, or in an under center play action passing scheme. And he can also do the Cam Newton stuff, right? He can run the football himself. He can do the read options, the RPOs, the whole package, right? So he checks a whole lot of boxes. There's one more question that there's some people that still are of the belief that the Patriots could make another splash at wide receiver. Allen Robinson is clearly disgruntled in Chicago. He's not going to – I can't see him staying there in Chicago beyond off season. But I think the question is if you're trading a pick for Allen Robinson, you're certainly not trading 15 for Allen Robinson, because I still think you need to use that on a quarterback, regardless of who it is, whether it's Mac Jones or Trey Lance or whatever. So what are you actually willing to give up for Allen Robinson? And remember, it's got to be a pretty good pick, because the Bears are going to eventually get something for him, right? So it's going to maybe, would you give up, because I think we're both out on giving up 15 for Allen Robinson, correct?
Yeah, but I think that's the problem, is that you need 15 to get him. So
you don't think they can get Allen Robinson for 47?
No, because somebody's going to offer back of the round first. One of these contenders will try to go like the super team route. People have talked about the Packers maybe getting aggressive and adding a wide receiver to kind of capitalize on Rodgers' window. I just think you need, and you probably need 47 to move up and get Trey Lance too. So, I'm not going to rule anything out, because it's the Bears and they're dumb. And Andy Dalton is their starter, like, willingly. Right. That didn't happen by accident. They woke up and chose Andy Dalton.
Allen Robinson's not going to want to stay there because Andy Dalton.
I don't fault him for wanting his way out, but what I'm saying is maybe you can just fleece the Bears because they're dumb and give them like a 4th round pick. But I mean, that you can't do. The one thing I'd wonder naturally is, can you maybe work Stephon Gilmore, JC Jackson, whichever one you're willing to move on from? Because the Bears still seem like they think they can win now. Yeah. And maybe if they trade Allen Robinson, that changes that. But they still seem to think they're contenders. So maybe you can convince them to take one of your corners and do something like that, which I would do, by the way. If you keep the other one, right? Let's say they keep JC Jackson, Gilmore, and like a day 3 pick, 2 day 3 picks for Allen Robinson. The Bears would have to be kind of dumb to do it, but I don't think it's improbable. If they want an NFL-ready player, nobody's going to be able to top that offer. Picks will top it. But if their goal is NFL-ready talent, nobody will be able to top Gilmore, and you're getting rid of him anyway. So if I'm the Patriots, that's the route I'm exploring when it comes to Allen Robinson.
So the reason why I even brought up Allen Robinson, because I think the Patriots are most likely out of this type of market at wide receiver, a guy that they're going to have to pay $15+ million to. I think this is actually why they went the tight end route, is because they didn't want to pay a wide receiver that kind of money. So they ended up just giving $12 million to 2 tight ends instead. But just throwing it out there, because we talked about earlier, they don't necessarily have a true X, right? They don't have that guy on the outside, unless you're going to count Hunter Henry as their X receiver. They don't necessarily have that. And Allen Robinson is that in a nutshell.
Actually, hang on. Can I make this conversation a little more interesting?
Sure.
And I saw some people in the chat say this, so credit to you guys. The Bears cut Kyle Fuller.
They did.
So, okay, so maybe that Gilmore thing isn't as crazy as I thought it was. And I'm not saying you're disconnected again, Evan. I'm not saying that he's going to have to dip out. I'm not saying that, the Patriots should give up on Gilmore. If they want to keep him, they should keep him. He's a really good player. The point is being, if they are going to trade him, if that's what it comes to, if they can't get an extension, if he's going to hold out, Allen Robinson's a pretty good consolation prize if you can't keep Stephon Gilmore. So the reason people are giving up on him, so to speak, is he's on the last year of his deal. He's going to want a new contract. The Patriots, just where they are right now in terms of building their roster, aren't exactly in a spot to pay a cornerback who's 30 years old, what Stephon Gilmore is going to want, and you get something for him instead of him holding out, you getting nothing. That is so it's not giving up. That's just the reality of the situation with Stephon Gilmore.
So I think I'm back now. Or should be.
You are back, yes.
So I still think if they're going to make a big play for an X receiver, Allen Robinson fits the bill. If they want to go in that direction, fine. It would take up most of the rest of their cap space, even if they structure the deal strategically to make sure his year 1 cap hit is not very high. But I think ultimately that would that'd be crazy, right? If they can get Allen Robinson here with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar and the guys that they've already added, now we're talking about one of the best offenses in the league in terms of receiver talent, at least on paper. I just don't know if the Patriots are interested in that part of the market at wide receiver, because they didn't chase any of those guys that are going to be expensive. They paid Nelson Aguilar $11 million for the first season, $7 million cap hit. They were in that market at wide receiver. It was a little bit more of the same for that spot. Tight end is where they ended up overpaying, or at least paying the top dollar for. So I don't think that the wide receiver position is going to be a spot they're going to spend on. But if Allen Robinson does shake free and he does want to come to New England, you can talk me into it, certainly on the field. It'd be a great fit, and it'd be a great just guy to have on your football team. But I don't know if the Patriots are necessarily going to pay that type of money to a wide receiver, any wide receiver really at this point, right. Besides maybe the exception, I would say, of like an Odell Beckham or someone like that they feel is truly worth it. I don't know if they feel like Allen Robinson is truly worth it, as good of a player as he is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Again, I'll backtrack to it again. The situation you just described with Allen Robinson in Chicago is very similar to the one Gilmore's in now. So I think if you make that trade, you're looking at it player for player. And I think it's a 1-year thing where it's, hey, we're just getting you out of Chicago, where we're putting you in a place where you can succeed. Come here for 1 year, play under the tag, and then go hit the market next year when the cap's up and you can get a ton of money. Right.
That sounds good to me. All right, so that does it for us.
Yeah, we only got one more, Evan. Don't let your brain collapse. We got one more tomorrow, and then next Monday will be the first time in like 8-9 weekdays that we haven't done a show.
I know. That's The people are loving it though, and we really appreciate the love.
We really do, yeah,
from everybody. So we are going to continue to do these shows because you guys continue to show out to watch them. So we'll continue to do them moving forward as well. We obviously still did them on Tuesdays and Thursdays and non-free agency times, but maybe we'll start to pick it up and do them a couple more days a week as well in the future if we have the news and we have the information to go out there and talk about it with you guys. We appreciate all the questions tonight. We'll be back on again tomorrow night, same time, same place, to do one last free agency show, and then we're going to sort of turn the page, I think, unless they make another big move, to the draft. I would say, go ahead.
Maybe Thursday, live mock draft.
Mock draft, maybe. Let's tease it. Maybe.
We'll see. You got to let us know on Twitter if you want it.
So I think the live mock draft is definitely in play on Thursday next week. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk a lot about quarterbacks, I'm sure, then again, too. So we will be back tomorrow night, same time, same place, like I said, to do one more free agency show. Then we're going to probably turn the page to the mock drafts and to the draft in general. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody.